We begin tonight with exclusive polling numbers that say President Joe Biden's popularity among Catholics is dropping. The study also finds a substantial majority of Catholics are less likely to vote for political candidates who support abortion until birth. The survey was conducted by EWTN News and Real Clear Opinion Research in late June, just before the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. It found among the faithful, President Biden has a favorable rate of 45% versus 53% unfavorable. In October 2020, then candidate Biden had a 52% favorable rate among Catholics. The poll also examined how inflation has affected the faithful. Nearly 9 out of 10 say their finances have been impacted a great deal or to some degree. Meantime, 60% of Catholics say they would not vote for a candidate who supports abortion until birth. This is the first installment of exclusive numbers from EWTN News and Real Clear Opinion Research. Part 2 tomorrow will examine current attitudes toward the Catholic faith. 2 future polls will track Catholic voters as general elections in November draw closer. From Real Clear Politics, we are joined by Andrew Walworth, Chief Content Officer, and Susan Crabtree, White House and National Political Correspondent, as well as Dr. Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News. Thank you all so much for being with us. Andy, I want to start out with you. Tell us, what does this poll tell us about where Catholics are right now politically?
Well, it's bad news for the president. I think that would be the headline from this poll. I think Matthew would agree. One of the key numbers was that you've got 47% approval of the president right now among Catholics, 53% disapproval. We polled in February 2020, asked the same question. At that point, Trump had 47% and a 53% disapproval rating. Those are kind of magic numbers. What we know is that in 2020, Trump lost by about that same number. Certainly looking at the midterms now, it looks very bad for the president in terms of the numbers, especially with, like I said, among the Catholics.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And Susan, I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from this first poll?
I thought it was interesting that the Catholic vote as a whole, we're talking all types of Catholics, those who go to church regularly, as well as those who only go once a year, that vote is split when we're looking at the midterms in November with just 4 months away. You had just 44% saying they would vote for a Republican candidate and 43% say they'll vote for a Democratic candidate. But there's a large chunk, 13%, who are still undecided. So it could still go either way and be a big win for Republicans, or Democrats could keep their majorities in Congress based on the Catholic vote alone. But you were seeing a little bit more spread, a little bit more support nationally for Republicans by about 4 percentage points. So this is a little bit less than that. I thought that was kind of significant. The Catholic vote is still gettable for both parties.
Yeah, and Matthew, compared, to the polls that EWTN News and Real Clear conducted back in 2020 for the presidential election, how do these polls compare?
Well, it's striking in a way because we're looking at, and Andy kind of hinted at this, at an almost mirror image from our findings in 2020, but it's reversed for the president. He had a reservoir of very goodwill among Catholics heading into the election, and we know from polling of Catholics that he did in fact carry the Catholic vote. It's a question as to how the percentages played out. What we're seeing now is that we're seeing the absolute reverse. Now, it's closer than we're seeing with some of the national polls, where the president is in some cases now in the low 30s. He's buoyed, I think, to some degree in the Catholic vote today, as he was in 2020 by the Latino vote. But one of the most important telling factors that we're going to be paying very close attention to as we head into the midterms is the question of mass attendance as a determiner of where you're going to vote. We saw wide gulfs politically and even sacramentally and devotionally among Catholics as to how they vote. And there the president is under deeper water, about 55% disapproval. What's telling, though, is that we're within the margin of error right now for all Catholics, whether they go often or rarely. He's still underwater, so he has lost an immense amount of ground among Catholics compared to 2020.
Yeah, very interesting. Andy, based on this poll, what are some of the key issues for Catholics?
Well, the key issue for Catholics, as is for the country as a whole, is the economy. It's the economy. It's the economy. 89% say financial issues are their number one issue for them. Interestingly enough, and I think this is some good news for the president, when it comes to blaming, who to blame, Catholics say 36% blame Biden, 33% blame it on Ukraine. So this idea of a Putin's, it's a Putin gas hike might actually be working. 25% say it's both. So certainly the economy is number one for them, but we found that, of course, abortion, especially in light of the Supreme Court decision, is important as well. But way above all the others is the economy.
Yeah, for sure. And Susan, I want to bring you back in here, and we should mention, speaking of that, this poll was taken just before the Dobbs decision and the overturning of Roe versus Wade by the Supreme Court. That said, how does the question of abortion, how does that turn out in this poll? And also, what are you looking for in the next poll?
Well, it was interesting to me that a plurality of the total Catholic vote approved of favored upholding Roe v. Wade by a 47% to 42% margin with very little gender gap. There was more gender gap in the general public, but both men and women were narrowly opposed to overturning, which is exactly what the Supreme Court just did. And party affiliation obviously was the big factor, influential factor on that, with Republicans strongly supporting reversing the decision by a margin of 52% to 36%, while Democrats were opposed to doing so by 58% to 33%. But that doesn't tell the whole story, of course, when it comes to abortion. A high percentage of Catholics said, by 65%, said that abortion conflicts with Catholic teaching. And I thought it was very interesting that just 18% of those surveyed said abortion should be available at any point. So unfettered abortion should be available. That's a little bit up, 15% since we did the survey in 2020. But still, that's a huge margin who believes that there should be some regulation to abortion.
Yeah, and before we wrap things up, Matthew, I'm curious, talk to us about why polls like this are important to Catholics.
Well, they are. They're important because Catholics comprise 22% of the overall U.S. population. There are about 70 million Catholics. So Catholics matter. We have seen that in election after election. Who carries a Catholic vote consistently can predict who's going to win the presidency and who's going to dominate in midterm elections. In this case, the distribution of Catholics in battleground states that we're going to be focusing on, especially in the coming polls, are going to be decisive, I think, in who actually ends up controlling Congress. That's historically true. I think that's going to be very much true this year as well.
Well, certainly very interesting findings, and thank you all so very much for being here with us today.